Hello, Vicky.
Hey, Sarab.
How are you?
I am very tired. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm tired too
Yeah.
today.
Which time zone are you in?
I'm in Dublin. It's 9 p.m. right now.
Yes. Yes. You've probably had a very long day.
Yes, yeah. Where you are?
I'm on the west coast of the
Yes.
United States.
Okay. Hi, Naveen.
Hey, Saurabh.
Hi. Okay. So I'm in Europe, Dublin.
Well, at least Dublin is lovely.
Yeah,
Got
it's
that
yeah,
going.
yeah. Weather is nice here.
Hey, Rich.
Hi, Rich.
Hi all, Rich Hieronymus from IBM. Thought I'd sit in and just
Okay.
observe today. Been following the project and hey Naveen, good to see you.
Here.
Hope all is well.
Yeah. Rich and I used to work together before.
Small world.
Yes.
Hey folks, um, I guess we can get started. I'm sure people will keep joining in. I see more new folks. Anyone wants to introduce yourself? If it's your first time here, let us know. How we can help you, how we can, what you're looking to get out of scorecards.
Yeah, I can jump in.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Rich Hieronymus. I'm on IBM's open source group and working on supply chain security issues within IBM. Been following the project and hoping I can find some ways to contribute.
Cool, thanks, Rich. Yeah, I heard someone else also wanted to go ahead.
Oh yeah. My name's David. Working at Red Hat Product Security. Um, Currently attending the tooling working group as well. I think there are interesting overlap functions speaking on both these and the other group, and I'm trying to understand when and where can I help. So nice to meet you all.
Cool, good to have you. Anybody else wants to go? Cool. I guess that's all. One quick thing before we get started. I just wanted, this is more of an admin thing. I am thinking of updating the biweekly to say scorecards and all star. I think we should be discussing both of those topics here. So just wanted to know if anyone had concerns, or if what folks thinks. If everyone's okay with it, I can go ahead and update it officially.
I think there's high overlap, and I want to talk about repo management later, and really lean on Jeff around the all-star stuff. Part of this is I think we need to, so as we build out new scorecard repos and think about testing and stuff, there's a huge overlap between the maintainer pool, and it might make sense to make sure all of the GitHub teams are configured in a way that all of us can kind of contribute and do reviews. So I'll get into that later though.
I concur. The only thing that I'm already our scorecard meetings are, we don't get to discuss lots of dev work. As long as we schedule time box stuff, I'm all for it. I just wanted to just let that know.
Okay, makes sense. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, as Naveen said, if we do end up needing the time, we could move to weekly. Move to like switching strategy and implementation, maybe alternating week to week. I don't know, but let's play it by ear and see how it goes.
I would say we do a little bit of everything. Keep the biweekly for now, and if we need to ramp up, we do. I think that we have just enough content to cover within the kind of biweekly cadence, and few enough maintainers that it may not make sense to increase the cadence.
Sounds good. Cool. So that's a +1 from everyone to go ahead and change the meeting, I guess, right?
So yeah, so one note on the meetings, like when we do the updates, we want to make sure that like one, sweep all of the scorecard repos and all-star for contact information. Like we should just have a single place for contact information, like where to go to get help, how to join the meeting. And then once that information is updated, we should make sure it's part of the meeting as well. So like the notes to the Google, like the link to the Google Doc should be included in the meeting notes, which is in the meeting invite, which it's not today. Also, we want to make sure that for any of the maintainers, have access to also run the meeting. So host keys being able to share co-hosts and all that stuff.
Yeah. So did you say that the meeting invite doesn't have access to the notes? I thought the meeting invite includes the link to the node doc, right?
I don't believe it does. I do this every time I join the meeting. Oh, it does. Never mind. I think one of the links was broken before. It may be on the scorecard repo where the link for the meeting does not include the password. So if you don't know the password, you need to hope that you have the invite.
I see. That doesn't sound right. Like we shouldn't need a password, but yeah, we can look into that.
The meeting is password protected. So I think the link to the meeting on the scorecard repo does not include the password. So if you don't already have the meeting in your calendar, then you're not coming.
Yeah, right. We explicitly did that because we don't want somebody to bomb our meeting, and that's the reason. We don't want Zoom bombs. That's the reason we didn't include, if I'm not wrong. Probably if
So,
go ahead.
So I think it's fine to add, and this kind of goes into the maintenance component, making sure all of the maintainers have host key to grab host and to use the moderation tools. We ran into the same thing with Kubernetes where we're sharing like new meeting stuff and we're getting Zoom bombed occasionally, but I think it's fine to include the password publicly or in a place where only people who have access to the doc have access to the password, but that's also exclusionary because if people cannot access the Google Docs and Google Docs in general, then they won't be able to get the password. So I think it's fine to include the password as long as we're ramping up how we're doing meeting moderation. And I can link guides from Kubernetes that'll give you some tips too.
Sounds good.
That's good. Yeah, I quickly wanted to jump into this discussion about Rohan's plan, the intern plan that he's working on, because I think there's some confusion going around in the scorecard maintainers. But before we go into that, I just wanted to ask, does anyone have any topics that I think a lot of new folks have joined. So any topics that you guys wanted to add to the agenda that we are missing right now, or should we just jump into our open items?
I think for like maybe not for this one, but for future meetings, like a lot of these topics are kind of assigned to maintainers. So we have an update section and we also have the open issues, which leave the open issues for like non-maintainer community stuff and pull the maintainer level updates into our respective areas.
Sounds good. Cool. Ron, maybe do you want to go ahead, talk through your design, and we can take some questions if folks have them.
Yeah, sure. I have a document if that's okay to screen share.
Can you also include a link to the document and make it comments open
Yeah.
for folks on the call?
Hey, Rohan, I need access to that. It's not an open document. Is it possible to get it to be open so anyone can comment on it?
Yeah, let me fix that right now.
Cool.
And is it a Google internal one right now?
No,
Yeah.
I think Rowan is just working on it as he goes along. I think we thought we'll present it because some of it was confusing, but it should be open to the public.
Did Ron share the doc with the mailing list? I think that's the only one it's going to be, the only way it's going to be actually public.
Is it possible not to share it to the mailing list so we don't have to join yet another Google group to get access to documents? And just make it, anyone who has the link can comment.
Comment for the world, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Google.
It's a restricted Google thing, yeah.
Yeah, we created with a Google account, and I think it's always problematic. Maybe, yeah, we'll find a way. Maybe we can just.
Rohan, if you can give me access to the doc, and I'll drop my name in the chat. If you give me access to the doc, I'll create a non-Google one and then open access to that one, and then we can use that one moving forward.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, actually, maybe you can just ping the link to the doc here. I can do it. You can go ahead with the presentation, and anyone who wants the access can actually request it for now.
Okay, so I'll start off. Here, one sec. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, we could I'll try to figure out the sharing later, but for now I'll just go ahead with this. So basically, like, the idea behind this project that I've been working on for like the past few weeks is to basically crowdsource these scorecard runs. So currently the scorecard is run weekly on like over 1 million repositories, and this is like a big strain on our computing power because we're running it using our servers. So we want to offload this work by having the actual users run it themselves on their repository. But then the issue is that there's no way to prove the authenticity of their results because they could just run the scorecard and then edit the output file and give themselves like the top scores. And there's no way to like prove that if someone claims a repository has a certain score, that it actually attained that score from the algorithm. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use cosign to write a signature on the results. And this is gonna use a GitHub attestation through OIDC. So that'll basically make sure like that signature is secure. And this will allow us to later on be able to verify that a certain scorecard result actually corresponds to the repository that someone is claiming that it's been run on. And also, aside from this, we're also going to implement a badge service. So this will allow repository owners to display like a little badge on their README or whatever that just shows the score, so that everyone, so that developers that are like importing it as a package or using it as a dependency can get a sense for like how secure and safe the project is. So the first component of this design is the signing via OpenID Connect. So currently when the scorecard action is run, there's going to be two possible results. There's going to be the JSON and then the serif files. So these two files combined basically give us like enough necessary information to attribute the result to a repository. So we're going to sign these two files using the keyless flow on the workflow. And then the attestation of the signature is going to get uploaded to SigStore. And then after this signing is done, this is in the workflow still. It's going to call our post endpoint. So we're going to create a scorecard verification API endpoint. This is going to be in the scorecard web app repository. So we're going to have a post endpoint, which is basically going to take the results from the workflow, from the scorecard action process, those two files that I mentioned earlier. And it's going to, first of all, ensure that the certificate is actually associated with that repository. So it's going to look up the entry of that signature and verify the repository and the branch associated with it. And then another thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the workflow that that the scorecard action was actually called from. So we're going to scan this workflow to make sure that it only has the definition that matches their template. So we're only going to allow the 4 steps that are actually necessary for a scorecard action to be run through the workflow. And this is going to make sure that within the workflow, there's nothing malicious going on. So for example, someone can't call scorecard action and then have their own step in the workflow that modifies their results before the signature is processed. So that's going to catch all those issues. It's also going to check for stuff like environment variables and like permissions that shouldn't be set. So that's basically like the basis of the authenticity of the results, that this workflow file that is attached to the results actually matches our template. So from there, we can also grab the associated score of the repository, and we're going to put that in a bucket so that we can save that association. And then we are also going to have a get endpoint, and then this is going to be for our badging. So this is pretty simple. All it does is just it takes in like a repository and a branch, and it's going to provide the most recent score if it exists. And these scores are all guaranteed to be authentic because of the previous verification that happened in the post endpoint. And then lastly, this is again the scorecard badge service. So it's going to look something like this, where as you can see in the URL, you would have, so right now everything's GitHub, but we're also planning on expanding it to other providers, like if we had GitLab or something like that. And then you would also have the organization and then the repository as the parameters. And then it would provide you with like a little image that you can attach on your README just to show like all your users what the general like security measure of the project is. So yeah, that's basically like most of the design for now. Does anyone have any questions or anything?
I have a question here. So how long are these scores? So if I'm a malicious user, I could get a high score, then not run the action. Like I could get a high score, not run the action for X number of days, or turn off that action and still have a high score, have malicious code in mind. So how long is the validity of the score? Or is it based on a commit SHA?
It's based on the commit SHA. So the certificate that's generated from the workflow being run, it's attributed only to that specific commit SHA. So if the repository is modified in any way, we can see that.
But would the badge be able to pick it up? Like do you get what I'm trying to say? Like I run my score yesterday, and today obviously there are 5 more commits that have gone, and the badge is still going to show me an 8, and it could either be malicious, or it could be like not everybody's going to get for every commit into a scorecard badge
Yes.
service. So have you thought about that?
Yeah,
Sure.
so I can probably try and answer that. So yeah, like trying to avoid maliciousness in the badge itself is kind of out of scope. The reason being, I mean, you don't even have to be malicious, right? You can basically put in your README a badge for some other repo, and we can't actually check it. So in a way, the badge is not really something that is like adding some kind of provenance or attestation. It is really for the maintainers to show what the score is. The authentic part, or rather the integrity of it, comes from the API that Rohan is generating, because that will always tell you, like for this commit SHA, this was the score recorded, and these were the details recorded. So the integrity comes in the API generated rather than the badge that shows up on the repo.
So would the API also provide me commit SHA and the date of the run? I'm just making sure. Would it also have the date?
That gets generated when we run Scorecard CLI today. We should ideally be storing the whole thing, and the that JSON have like the runtime, the SHA at which the scorecard ran. And,
sure, right. Because if I'm trying to consume a repository, I'm not obviously not going to depend on the badge, but as long as I can go do a get on the scorecard service, I can get what date the last one was. It helps me identify if somebody's playing this game. Just want to make sure that. Cool. Awesome.
Cool. Any other questions? Anyone else wanted to clarify or discuss?
I think this is awesome. Sorry, go for it.
No, I just wanted to ask, is there a decision made on how the data that can be retrieved from these API, what kind of format will it have? Is it going to be plain JSON or JSON LD maybe?
So we are planning to do a more detailed design and discussion on that later. But as of now, since it's like a V0, it'll match exactly what you see when you run scorecard CLI, minus format JSON. So we want to keep the format consistent with what you would see there. But there is a long-term discussion to be had as to how this should be exposed.
So I'm going to make some googly comments based on things that I've seen in other projects. I want to stress the importance of we're talking about it now, and that's super awesome. And because it's V0, that's even awesomer. I want to stress the importance of when we have, and I included it in my section, but we should at some point have a longer discussion about what proposals look like, or what they need to look like. So with my Kubernetes hat on, I'm one of the co-creators for the Kubernetes enhancement proposal process, and I think that is it's great. It's got some nice things, but it's also heavyweight for folks. What I notice a lot, and especially in areas that I'm involved in, so like release engineering, testing, is that we get these proposals from Googlers that are maybe not to the spec of that community. I think it's okay right now because we don't have an expectation of what that spec should be, but we should create it. And when people are coming with proposals, Google internal or what have you, often something will get well formed on the Google side, and then it'll show up in the community. And a lot of people will wonder, where did this discussion happen? Why wasn't I a part of it? There are some design decisions made that I don't necessarily agree with, or for lots of instances, design decisions made and implementation happening, and then not having that support from not having that support to maintain that implementation, right? So I think I just want to stress that it's very important that we decide what designs look like. I think this is great. Just to be clear, this is not about the specific design. It's about things that I've noticed in other communities coming from the Google side. So I think I think we have an opportunity to fix it, and I would like to.
I think
Yeah.
that's a really great point to define these things up front and get out in front of it. I mean, not just Google, but I've been in several communities where, you know, things suddenly get popped on them, like, you know, Athena bursting fully formed out of the head of Zeus. It's here's this fabulous thing. And the community's like, well, that's nice, but where did that come from? So being able to set expectations in advance allows us to hold people to those expectations. So I don't know whether, Augie, you have any suggestions for moving forward with that, or whether you would like to put that on the agenda for future calls, because it looks like we've got some other things we might want to cover today, but I'm a big +1 on pretty much everything you said. Yay, go Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, long term, we can hash it out. I think, you know, so Kubernetes enhancement proposals were inspired by like Python PEPs and the Rust RFCs. So there is lots of information to draw from that. There are also like lighter weight architectural decision records, or ADRs. We use some of that in like inclusive naming initiative, but it's, you know, obviously for inclusive naming, it's a little less technical than an implementation here. So like I love seeing this, because like, so I can put up an issue or a discussion point, and we can start there. I love seeing this design because it helps inform why some of the pushes are happening. Like, so Rohan is also working on changes in scorecard action, and I was like, where's this coming from? Like, so now I know exactly how the story ties together. So getting this information out sooner rather than later, and definitely ahead of implementation, because like some of these things are already in flight, right? And does that mean that it's on? Does that mean that it's on, that we're beholden to some new expectation as maintainers and as contributors that we're not aware of, right? So even more important to get things out earlier rather than later, so the community can kind of like, you know, swarm on it.
Makes sense. +1 to that.
Totally different thing. On the JSON that Rohan and Azim were mentioning on the output, that means we need to, how are we going to versioning? Like we need to think about like are we thinking about versioning? Because if we add additional features to JSON, like because now it's a web API, do we stick to that? Like all those conversations has to be thought through. If there is something that's going to be, because now we're publishing this web API endpoint. I'm hoping that that's a contract that we're going to stick to for the LTS.
So
have you thought through? Yes, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a very vague topic on my updates, is like, what's an API, right? And we're starting to get these multiple areas that want to consume what we're working on, right? So you look at Scorecard Action as an example, All-Star is an example, Witness is another example, right? This API, right? A lot of this stuff needs to live in Scorecard. It needs to live as an API in Scorecard and a contract that we maintain. Additionally, like around versioning and stuff like that, we need to understand compatibility, right? So like we have mentioned Semver in the past, and we already use Semver. If you're using Semver, there is, even though not everyone's doing it, there is some soft expectation that you are trying to adhere to the expectations that Semver lays down. So I think we should be working towards doing that. I say all of that to say, all of this should be rooted in Scorecard, right? So we have kind of things in place right now. We have like some of the feature flags for like V5, V6, enable, Serif, whatnot. We need to refine the way we're doing that, so that we can say, like, yes, if you're building out this feature, it needs to live under the V5 flag, right? And it doesn't, and it's completely disabled unless people want to test the waters, right? But it all needs to live in Scorecard, and everything else, you know, every consumer builds on top of that.
I think we need to have a larger discussion on this. Like,
Yeah, I think just for the interest of time, I kind of want to table the discussion so that we have enough time for other topics too. Stephen, I know you wanted to have, you've added a bunch of updates that I know you wanted to discuss. Is this the same thing that you are mentioning now? Is this something you want to take later, or is there something specific you want to bring up now?
So I guess, as part of my updates, I'll say that, I've started to poke around at the whole what's an API question, right? So, two of our consumers, we've got the scorecard action and All-Star. I started an initial PR for All-Star, and Jeff, I don't know if you've had a chance to take over that thing. But effectively, we want to be able to expose all of the checks that you can do within Scorecard in All-Star, right? And ideally, we're not writing the same checks for All-Star that already exist in Scorecard, right? So right now, I think the highest fidelity endpoint that you have for Scorecard is just to use the CLI tool, right? Because all of the validation for the options is happening already within it, right? So part of the work that I've been doing is kind of like restructuring the CLI so that you can essentially remix it, and then so some of the options have been pulled out into a separate package, and the options are now a struct which you can add flags to. So the way the CLI is built is essentially you instantiate a new option set, you add the flags to the option set, it auto populates some defaults, right? And that means that anyone who's using like Scorecard command or whatever it's exported as has the ability to say they will automatically get validation for those options, including if they, in the case of like Scorecard action, where we're kind of using environment variables to make decisions, right? So when you populate the option struct, it's using the guy Carlos who maintains Go Releaser has a package called, like, I think it's like env or something, env v6, right? And you can specify tags for your struct that if those environment variables exist, they'll auto-populate them, right? So I worked around some of that by doing that. So the new version of Scorecard action will be Golang based instead of an entry point, a shell entry point. I will also note that the shell entry point is not actually an entry point right now. So we're running into issues, Rohan. You'll see, and you're kind of working through it on your PR, and I'm working through it in other ways on the side. That's the entry point is kind of inflexible, right? Because it just assumes you're going to do that thing and that's it, right? And an entry point should allow you to pass options into it. The default state of it, you should be able to run the container image and it spits out the help usage, right? Unless you pass a command into it, right? We can default the command, but right now we're not. We're basically saying entry point run. So I'm going to kind of expand that so that we can choose whether we run the bash version of it or the Go version of it, right? That'll allow us to do some testing in the background as we build out like the EDE suite for Scorecard action. And then we can say, all right, we're ready to flip the switch, right? So the first stage is kind of working on making sure that the command is importable, which it is today. And then there is some logic within the command that we can push into like package.run scorecards. Once that happens, it makes it a lot easier for people who are not interested in running a command like All-Star to just pick up run scorecards and have it do the same validation that the scorecard command would. So that's what I've got as a baseline. Yeah.
Sounds like you have a vision. Do you have any like
Did I write it down?
Do you have any like example, like what it would look like for a program to call this, essentially the same CLI and entry point similar?
Absolutely. So I'm gonna share my screen for a hot moment, and let me know if you can't see it. Actually, just let's go to the command line. I don't think I have the things I need here on this laptop, but I spell correctly. So this will give you an example. It's bigger. So main.go for scorecard action is essentially just calling entry point new. Entry point new is going to create a new Cobra command and then does an execute of the Cobra command, right? If we go back into what entry point is actually doing, you'll see that. So if you ask for a new entry point, you ask for a new command from the entry point package, it's taking the options from Scorecard, right? So Scorecard options, it's creating a new set of them. And within the new, it does some defaulting and some initial validation of those options. And if you can't create them through an error, the initialization does some specific, some specific setting of options for scorecard action. And then we're just saying that so as a result of creating the new options, you're also going to get a stack of the scorecard options, right? So they're the scorecard action options and then the scorecard options, and there's a little bit of overlap to account for environment variables. You're creating a new at this point, you're creating a new command, and the new command is based on the scorecard command, right? And what I'm doing is I'm layering on top of this command. I added a new flag to allow you to output results, because within our entry point, we're basically piping them to a results file. And then I'm modifying the pre-run execution for the action command. And I'm also doing a little bit of cleanup, here. So there's some flags that within the context of the scorecard action you don't really care about. So the npm, PyPy, Ruby gems flags, and then I mark all of them as hidden, right? So it's still, you're still running the scorecard the flags hidden and some additional flags. And then finally, I'm adding this print command as a debug to be able to say, like, I just show me all of the options that you've configured thus far, and we can use that as a quick means of testing, like if it should actually work in the environment. So that's not overly complicated, but it's not actually possible to do if you kind of do the classic configuration of a Cobra application. If you have a bunch of inits within your root commands and stuff like that, then you pre-configure a lot of the options before the user gets to see them, right? So unhiding a bunch of the magic, making the addition of the flags a part of the option set. So the options are an interface, and then that allows you to kind of remix the command like you see. So.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, I think like consolidating what what scorecard exposes and how it should be invoked is a really good idea. I worry a little bit on All-Star side. Are we going to be able to pass an authenticated transport? Are we going to be able to get like structured data out for the checks that were run, the scores that it results, the errors, and those sorts of things?
Right. So if we look at, if we look at this.
So I quickly wanted to jump in and say maybe this is a discussion we should do offline, because I mean, I think there's a larger group of people here, so maybe we should focus on something that everyone can contribute to.
I would argue that this is like the command structure and how you invoke Scorecard is pretty important for everyone.
Okay. Yeah,
I think I'm happy to,
items too. So yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we can take it offline, or if folks want, we can continue the discussion.
Yays, nays, ups, downs.
Do we have any other hard pressing things? Like that's something that we want to make sure that everybody, like Laurent or this community, have anything else? If not, if there's something hard pressing, then we can decide what it is.
Yeah, I think Laurent had a bunch of issues that he's been meaning to discuss. I think there's one big thing, especially about this webhook check, which I think Laurent had been meaning to get a opinion on from the community for a while now. There's that, and I think a bunch of other things on dependency vulnerability checks. So yeah, if folks think this is something we can do offline, maybe we can table the discussion and discuss these other items that we haven't discussed for a while now.
To be honest, at least my opinion is like I like to know how the command what Stephen's thought process is, but I don't want to push down other priorities. That's why I come back to
So
the same
so
thing.
just to jump in, at this point, I think we are spending more time on deciding if we should talk about it as opposed to me showing you the last bit.
Okay. Okay, please go ahead.
So there's also an issue tracking this, which folks can, I'll drop in the chat, which folks can check out and leave comments about how they feel about design. Like nothing is really decided outside of like stuff that is obviously, useful and kind of like moves the ball forward. So come on, computer. Wow. All right. So if my floating controls will go away, we've got the webhook secret. We've got, all right. So now within Scorecard, the problem really is here in, if we look at the command itself, right? Because this was built as kind of like command first, right? All of, a lot of the important logic is pushed into the root command, right? So you've got do some stuff, do some great stuff, get a logger, do some more stuff, get the docs, blah, 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 right? You get to, this is the meat, right? You actually, what we care about is this package run scorecards, right? So the next step for me really is, and then also you look at this final bit, right? And it's like, assessing the metadata, doing some sorting, yada, yada. And then, if everything's cool, then don't spit out an error, right? So there are a lot of things that, you today as a consumer can still leverage, right? To formatting the results. Like a lot of this is common logic, which means it doesn't need to be in the command itself, right? So you've got this repo results. You want to get the repo results, which means everything above this needs to be handled in run scorecards. So what I was getting to is like the next step really is to push everything that's happening here down into run scorecards and then make sure that run scorecards isn't as large. I don't know how large the surface area of it is right now, but if you're looking at something like this where you need to line wrap the options that the arguments that you're passing to a command, it probably means that the structure of it can be better done. Right. So this is passing a set of clients and passing a set of options, right? And then you do the logic within that instead, right? So I really should only need the context. I should really only need the context, the set of options, which should include the repo URI, and then the clients, or what clients I want are included in the options. So then run scorecards goes about creating the clients and doing its thing.
So you want to move creating the client into options instead of it being passed as an argument to the run scorecards.
So I guess not that precisely, but saying if the set of enabled checks, say, right, includes badging, right, then that needs to be, like if the set of enabled checks includes badging, I'm going to go through the list of enabled checks and say, okay, well, I know that I want to look into the CII best practices or the OpenSSF badge, which means I need to turn on the CII client, right? So when I ask for a new client, I'm passing a set of options that say, here are the clients that I want, and I should only get those clients. And then I think overall we're chatting about like within Scorecard Action, and then also kind of between Scorecard Action and All-Star, there's a general need for just like the simple GitHub client, right? It's some of the clients do slightly different things, and I forgot who exactly is planning on working on client stuff, but we were talking about Go Git and using Go Git instead. Right. So Rob, you are unmuted,
Sorry.
by the way. No. So we were talking about Go Git, and like if we have a simple client that is, you know, and a concrete implementation of the Git stuff and deciding what we need out of that, we can build off of that using like, you know, functional options pattern or something to say blah, blah, blah with transport, right? And then that solves the problem for anyone who needs transport. You know, specifically, like, you know, if you look at All-Star needs transport for all of these things, and it doesn't need to instantiate a new transport for each of them. Should be able to pass it along all of the clients.
Sounds good. Thanks for going through it. I'll do some
no
reading
problem.
on all the issues.
Cool. Should we, Lauren, do you want to jump in with your topic?
Yeah, I had a topic on webhook. We have an open issue on creating a check for checking the security of webhooks. So basically, whether they have SSL enabled, if they are using a secret, things like this. So this check can only work if you have a PAT token. It cannot work with a GitHub token because it requires some sort of ownership access to the repository. And so I'd like to know, like, there's been some discussion on whether we want to have checks that may not be available, for example, through the GitHub action. So we can still have it enabled in the GitHub action, but users will have to use a PAT. And I think we have an idea of trying to move towards GitHub tokens, which are ephemeral and don't expose the identity of users. So yeah, I wanted to ask if people have an opinion on whether we should do it or not do it. I think one of my arguments why it would be useful is we already have some checks today, like branch protection, that where we don't get all the data depending on whether the token has admin privileges or not. So this would be a different one, another check doing this. And I think even though it's not available in scorecard action, well, users can enable it with a PAT, but by default it might not be available if we ask users to use a GitHub token. So it might not be available on the GitHub action. It might not be available in the. It will definitely not be available in the weekly scan. But for users who want to use it on the command line and maybe scan their own repos, maybe you know, as part of a penetration testing or things like this for their own company, I feel there would be some value for it. So those are kind of the arguments. And back to Rohan's work on GitHub action, if we send the data back to our servers, we will have to be a little bit more careful about not sending the webhooks information. So I think I've covered kind of everything that was in the tracking issue. If I forgot some things, please chime in. I'd love to hear what everyone thinks.
I've got a bunch of opinions. So I think that we should try to better understand the permissions required for each of the checks. We probably do already, but we should document all of that stuff if it isn't, and then say, so for, like, I see no problem with enabling a webhook check outside of making sure that it is very clear to user off the bat that you need this for this to function, right? So in the set of enabled checks, when you kind of pass those options through, it should, our first validation pass should be, can you do this? Or, like, please be aware that for you to be able to do this, you need this you need this level of access, right? And it should not just be in our docs, but also in output of the commands, right? So that's the first thing. And we can even decide that, like, these are checks that you can run. These are checks that you can run regardless of like whatever our baseline, whatever our baseline level of permissions is. So if that is the GitHub token running within the context of a GitHub action, then we say these are the checks that you can run if you're using a GitHub token within a GitHub action, right? If you need to run these checks, the level 2 or level 3 or whatever you want to call them checks, you need an access token you need to create a pat that has these permissions. Or you need to, if you have org admin or you are a security manager or whatever configuration for GitHub, then you need to have created an organization secret that this repo has access to with these permissions. The secret needs to be named this for the workflow to work properly.
Yeah, so when you say the first thing we need to check in code is that, let's say you run Scorecard without specifying the checks, and the token cannot run on the webhooks. Like, do you just show the results as I didn't have permission, or do you
So
GitHub's
I can
never
see that
telling you what you have permission to or not. Like, it'll just
exactly. Yeah, so I think as a for user experience, I want something like, if I run a tool, it needs to work, or it needs to tell me as soon as possible, the whole return early, like as soon as possible, what's wrong, right? So if the webhooks are part of the enabled checks and it runs through and it says like, hey, you have not set a GitHub token, it should bail out immediately.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to kind of raise here is like I kind of raised this point in the issue too. I'm trying to understand like how folks think of like both All-Star and Scorecard as a product. So in my mind, like Scorecard is really trying to bring forth all these security metrics, especially publicly available security metrics in the open. So in fact, most of the checks all the checks that Scorecard runs today are accessible through a public repo, except branch protection. And even in branch protection, is just 1 or 2 settings. So my worry with having a check like this is the fact that can we get into a situation where we unexpectedly expose these private information which should have only been accessible through like an admin pat or something of the sort, and we end up causing more harm than good. And maybe this is a better fit for something like All-Star, which has all of this. I mean, it's the product. All-Star as a product is built for this. Like you can privately ping maintainers and say, this is not working, so maybe you should fix it and things like that. So I want to understand what folks think there, as a product fit.
I +1 Azim's comment. I'm always worried about, especially when we have an All-Star doing this. Even I've had similar thought process on that. That's my opinion.
So I do think there is an issue where, yeah, like if we say here, provide your privileged pat to the action, and then Scorecard runs and posts the results publicly, you might be posting some results publicly that you didn't really want to, which is, hey, I have a really insecure webhook setup, which normally a public pat wouldn't be able to read and determine on that repo that you have an insecure webhook setup. So I think that's something to consider. As far as the All-Star side, I mean, All-Star is a GitHub maintenance tool for somebody who needs to manage and enforce like settings on repos at scale. I do think there's a very valid use case for Scorecards, not All-Star for I want to gather information about a repo that I have more privileged access to. Then it's not somebody else's repo. I have my own repos that I want to gather more information about. And I think getting this score of you're doing this right or wrong on your own repos would be valuable and fits in with the product.
So I guess my opinion is that they're the same thing, in ways. I view kind of all of these components that are flowing in and around Scorecard and All-Star to be the same thing, right? All-Star is and even now, like we're talking about integrating components of Scorecard into All-Star so that we can expose more of the policy, right? So like Scorecard is the policy and part of the implementation. All-Star is a concrete implementation, and when all of that is exposed, All-Star is a reporting mechanism for Scorecard within the context of GitHub, right? There's nothing to stop someone from writing an All-Star implementation that would work on a GitLab that would work somewhere else, right? So like I view it all as like components of the same quote unquote product, right? And this kind of goes back to the API stuff, right? How we design this, so there's so one of the implementation paths is creating a command, right? Either way, there is some point at which you want to get results, right? So whether you're getting results from Scorecard and you're getting it on the command line in a table, JSON, Serif, what have you, or you're getting some prettified view of the results in a GitHub issue, I think that's just a reporting mechanism. So I kind of view them all as the same product.
So if it's an issue about, to get back to the action and leaking sensitive data, we can make by default the GitHub action not use any of those sensitive checks, and then we can ask users to enable it explicitly via a command to the action. The action takes some arguments like what format do you want Serif, and I forgot the other one, but we can make something specific saying I want to enable checks that need a path or something, and if that's not set, even if you use a path, we're not going to run those checks. Like if that helps.
Yeah, that makes sense. Make it hard for people to shoot themselves in the foot outside of explicitly enabling it.
I'm curious about, yeah. So Jeff, just one out of curiosity. So if I understand correctly, All-Star today does something like, if a branch protection setting is off what it needs to be, it can kind of, fix it for you. Do you think it makes sense for this to be something like that? Because this is also like a Boolean setting, if I'm not wrong. So
well, it can't
should this be...
like add a secret to an existing webhook. I mean, you have to, whoever's receiving the secret, the webhook would need to validate the secret too. What's the other error case?
It's not just Boolean or so. Yeah, I think the person who started working on it said he can do secrets, but he can also look at whether SSL is enabled. And I think there's another setting in the webhook that I don't remember about. He said he can do a check on all of those. So there's probably 3 things you can check.
And sorry, I want to say something right now. We should not, like, I know right now it's looking only at GitHub, but future these checks are cross-platform. All GitLab also has webhooks. So I don't know if strategy is to have All-Star for GitLab, but if that's not the case, adding to Scorecard is another +1. So essentially, we will be able to add these features at some point.
I would almost suggest merging the repos to be honest, because like it forces us to collaborate on how each of these components are designed, right? And it kind of forces us to make sure that any path that you choose, if you choose like the Git, like for example, like if you have branch protection, right? GitLab is going to have branch protection too, right? So when you write the branch protection, logic, it's, I want, like the, branch protection is maybe, something is the interface, right? And there's a concrete implementation of branch protection for GitHub concrete implementation of it for GitLab, right? Not saying that we have to merge the repos, but it does force us to look at the same things as we're doing releases. So.
Should we? It seems like we have a consensus on basically going ahead with the webhook related stuff. Lauren, do you want to update the issue and let Carlos know that we are okay with proceeding with it?
Well, I think we need a proposal first on how we're going, what the UX is going to be for, in general, different different privileges of checks or paths or whatever.
I think maybe the safe thing to do is we probably don't expose this check in something like scorecard action for now, because I think we are having these discussions about should we even need a personal access token in scorecard action as of now. So maybe
we don't want to have that by default, right?
Yeah, so we should probably start off with not having this check enabled in scorecard action by default. And then once we can figure out a secure way of exposing it, we can actually enable it.
But I mean, we're going to have a CLI that's going to have to expose it somehow, right?
So
yeah, the CLI,
yes.
Right. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yes. So I would say for the CLI, like we should tighten up our mechanism for doing feature flags, right? Because we have something for I slipped in a V5 one, even though like there's nothing under it right now, but we have stuff for V6. We should decide if the V6 stuff is actually V5 stuff. We should decide if enable serif, like we can't say that people aren't using serif because we use the serif stuff in the scorecard action by default, right? So we should, and serif is currently feature flagged. Like if it doesn't need to be feature flagged, then we should say it's on for the next release. So that's one part of it. But two, for things that we're not sure about yet and are strictly experimental, call them out. Like merge the code, but say like, hey, this is you, like unless you enable, so like if you think about like cosine experimental, right? Unless you enable scorecard experimental, these things won't work, right? And default the action to not using scorecard experimental.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I think the code is already gated by a webhook macro something environment variable. So I think we could having the code in and then just disable it for everything, including the GitHub action, and force people to use the environment variable to enable it. I think that would be a good first step, and then I can start thinking more about, failing early and what's possible there. If a non-path token or without the right privileges is given, I don't know what's possible, but I'll look into it a little bit further.
Cool. I think we are 2 minutes over. I guess we can end. All right. Cool. See you, folks. See you in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Later.
Cool. Thanks.